want to talk to you today is MSH, which is Make Shit Happen. And we need to do that going forward because the industry is going to change and we can't predict what that change looks like, and I wish I could, because if I actually could I would be sitting in the Bahamas on my yacht, but we can't. We've just got to roll with what's going to happen, but we can do certain things and think about signals that are coming to help us prepare for what changes might be ahead. Look, a bit of background for me. So I grew up in Ross on the west coast of the South Island. This is the school bus. I'm the small one at the front. And my sister, I do have a brother as well, but all three of us couldn't fit on the horse. And ironically, it is quite a big horse though. But and so I'm really passionate about rural communities. And for me, I was very lucky to grow up in a place where, I could walk. I mean, the funny thing is, right, Ross, I don't know if you've ever been there. It's so good being in the South Island because I don't have to explain where it is. Last week I was somewhere and I just said, oh, where that bridge went out? It's like an hour north. We used to just run around everywhere. We're up the back hills. There was people cyaniding possums. And the thing is, Mum just used to say, don't touch the tree that has the pink spray paint on it. And none of us died, so we must have followed that instructions. And so you actually get out and you get to do these great things in rural communities, but protecting them is helping them change, not keeping them the same. This is my herd at the moment. I live in Eureka in the Waikato. I actually try to run a lifestyle property by myself. I don't do a very good job of it, and praise the Lord for the surrounding dairy farmers, who I am their worst nightmare. But they really look after me, and I'm incredibly grateful for how they help me and support me, right down to the bit where they'll drive past. I'm right on the road. They'll drive past and say, you've got buttercup, someone needs to top your paddocks, and I'll get home and the paddocks are topped. And for me, I've actually burst into tears coming home after travelling for 3 days, being exhausted, and knowing that my neighbour, who is a share milker, who's really busy, who has a busy family life, who does lots within the industry, took the time to come and do that. So for me, rural communities are really important. Look, some more background. This is not just a story about me. It's not going to feel like a 21st speech. But, my parents lost every property to mortgagee sale. And so economic relevance is really important. Having profitability is really important. And I'm not trying to bag on my parents. They're really cool. They kept us alive and loved us and stuff. And when you move to lots of towns, you get real good at meeting new people and you get a good sense of humour. But ultimately, they didn't do anything different, and they got really confused why they kept getting the same result. And then I went into rural banking and I sat on the other side of the table from people doing the same thing and really confused as to why they got the same result. And I'm going to tell you now, it doesn't matter what side of that table you're on, it's horrible. It doesn't matter if you're the person that's in the horrible financial situation or the banker talking to you. No one's winning in that. No one feels good about it. So the whole thing is now is I just really want to help people understand how to change themselves, how to change their business, and how to shift to really maintain relevance, but it's got to be economic relevance into the future. Because everything costs something, and I think sometimes we forget that, and I was just listening to the questions. Look, the reason stuff's happening and the reason we have a heap of compliance is nothing to do with the government. It's actually everything to do with the consumer. We actually we export 90-something% of what we produce across all food products. So if you think of the world's food system, the value is $8 trillion US. So that's across all of the world, the food system. New Zealand gets $40 billion of that $8 trillion. I can't work out the zeros, I don't know what percentages. And so we're actually a really small part of a massive system. So we actually really need the world to want our food. And that doesn't make us insignificant, that makes us more significant, but it means we have to listen and we have to change and we have to evolve based off what the consumer wants. And it's really bloody annoying because it would be heaps easier if we didn't have to. But if we didn't have to, we're not going to have people to buy our products. We're not going to have economic relevance, and we're not going to have beautiful communities. And the reason we have good communities is because when we have profitability, we can afford to support those who can't support themselves. So hopefully I take you on a bit of a journey today. Either that, I'm just going to bore the crap out of you, whatever, just ask heaps of questions at the end. I'm going to start off with a couple of funny things that are happening. Well, they're not that funny. They're not like ha-ha funny, but interesting things happening in the world. So at the top there, they're now working out a way to make leather out of mushrooms. So how we wear things, what we're wearing, and how those are made are all starting to change as well. The next one down there, the little picture of the restaurant, is Spice Restaurant, and it's a robotic restaurant. So these computer engineers one day tried to work out how do you get food that's affordable, that's healthy. And so what they did is they went to a Michelin star chef and said, what can you help us do that's really economic? So what they actually have now is, it's not an extensive menu, it's basically stir fry or stir fry, But you can kind of choose your protein that goes in it and your vegetables, and it's pretty much robotic until the person hands the food to you. So you can get for about £8 a nice meal, well, you know, a healthy meal that's vegetables and protein in a restaurant designed by a Michelin star chef. So disruption and all these changes come in different ways, and it's not always your neighbour who's going to produce more. It could be a computer programmer that comes up with a random idea. New Zealand King salmon is another awesome one. I've got to be honest, you know, I'm one of those people that's a bit judgy, and then I go and learn about stuff and realise I judged it wrong. And I was like, oh, poo, like fish poos, it's going to be gross. And it was brilliant, like it doesn't smell or anything. And you know, what they do, like there was a pen I was standing in that's probably the size of this room, and they make $4 million off that one pen. There were 33,000 fish in it. So there's other things that we can do within New Zealand as well. If they can go open ocean, then they will be able to not necessarily take up more space in the world, but actually, or in the water, but actually make more profitability and have more money coming through into the agri-system. So there's lots of cool things that are happening, and many of you are probably saying, well, how does that apply to my farm? And it really doesn't at this point, but it applies to New Zealand's agriculture as a whole, and that's what we've got to start thinking about as our industry as a whole. You know, look, I'm not going to dwell on these alternative proteins because you're pretty sick to death of hearing about them. There's plant-based, you know, there's cellular, where they grow a cell in a petri dish and then they turn it into something and it looks like white because it's quite gross. We've got alternative animals. It turns out that pretty much you can milk anything. And so someone's talking about donkeys at one point, somebody was talking about cockroaches. Camel milk's a big deal at the moment, but it's not in the same space. So you're not going to go to the supermarket and get a litre of camel milk. It's actually been used for high-end chocolate. So chocolatiers in France are actually using it to make this very fancy chocolate. And apparently it's really high in vitamin C and blah, blah. And then we've got Pamu doing their deer milk. And again, that's kind of a niche thing, right? So that's going into desserts. And I don't know if you've tried it. It's really cool. You know, if you put whatever ice cream in front of me, I'm not really going to know what animal it came from. It all tastes good to me. You know, I didn't kind of get this shape by not eating things. But you know, so ultimately these alternative animal things are going to keep coming up. We've got sheep milk in New Zealand. You know, we've had goats for a long time. So these are the sorts of trends that are coming through. And then we've got insect. And I just I mean, it's so old, insect now, but we've got a company in New Zealand called Anteater, and I really advise you pop on their website at some point. It's quite a hoot. So you go on there and they talk about their grass-fed locusts. Now, I'm not a locust expert, but I know what else they actually eat. So, and then they talk about the hoo-hoo grubs, and they've just got this, and they talk about them like they're this beautiful, delicious, creamy bug that comes out of a tree. But still, they talk about these great things. And the best thing that they've got is the lemongrass ant, which they're actually selling to high-end restaurants to go with the steak. So it's often these things are complementary, they're not replacements. And you know, I mean, I want to know who first licked the ant to work out what it tasted like, because I'm not sure how that went down, but they pay a lot of money to make this lemongrass ant sauce that goes on top of a steak. So, you know, there's all these cool things that happen and disruptors, but often it's not a negative, and it doesn't often mean that we're knocking something else out of play. And we heard recently about the Impossible Whopper. So Impossible Burger, I actually did get to try this. It does taste just like meat. You definitely can't tell it's not meat. I find the CEO a little bit mental, so I don't like it, purposely because I don't like him. But that's just my opinion. You know, there's billions of other consumers out there that feel differently. And it's great that it's gone into Burger King, because you know what? It's going into a budget basement, cheap commodity product. And the more that these products start to filter into this, the other day Beyond Meat actually said that they wanted to be the cheapest food that there could be, the most affordable food in the supermarket. And I said, damn straight, you go do it, because we don't want to be. We want to be the best. Being the most affordable doesn't often equate to being the best or being the best for our business. So all of these sorts of products that are shifting through and coming into the market are going into that commodity space, and that's the space we want to stay out of, because no matter what we do, when things are done like this, we will not be able to meet the production point with them. The one on the right there, Perfect Day, that is a cellular milk made. So what they do is they extract the DNA out of casein, or the protein DNA, they inject it into a yeast and they brew it. So it's a little bit like craft beer, but without the good buzz. And you know, they're basically saying it's just like milk. because it kind of is. Now, I'm not a scientist, but apparently they're calling it vegan milk as well. So these are the sorts of things that are starting to come through. Now, the irony of that milk is it hasn't hit the shelves yet, hasn't gone commercial. So they are saying that consumers don't want to consume something that has a GMO factor to it, and which is ironic because Impossible Foods is GMO, but people don't seem to worry about that. So they haven't hit the shelves. Again, I suspect that product will start off being kind of a little bit cool and niche, and then it will flick into that commodity market. And there are lots of consumer drivers coming through. And you know, the Minister sort of talked about some of it, Colin's talked about some of it, and I think what we need to remember is it's not a set and forget system, and I know that's horrible to hear when you're exhausted and you've had enough of change and you want it to stop, but unfortunately it's not going to stop. The change is going to keep coming, and consumers are going to keep expecting more. And what they expected yesterday is going to become a base expectation of tomorrow, and new things will start to arise. But for New Zealand, I think what we need to be careful about is we often talk about creating value, but what we forget about is we've already got loads of value here. We've actually got to capture the cool things that we're already doing and make sure that we're aware of it, because a lot of what the consumer wants, we already do. We just don't tell them. So we've got to make sure that we're really aware of what consumers want and make sure we're getting messaging about that to them. And one of them is environment. Now, I can make a guarantee to you that there's not going to be a point where we go, bugger the environment, we're here for a good time, not a long time. Environment is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as a focus for a consumer and anywhere. And it should be a focus for us, right? Because you probably have grandkids, or you're going to have grandkids, or you're going to have kids, and you want to make sure that the land is better than how we have it for them in the future. So that's just a given. You know, to me, farmers are environmentalists. But a big focus they want now is regenerative. So the regenerative side of it is, how do we make it better? How do we actually improve what we've got? Every day that we produce something, how are we making sure that that paddock that the cows walked out of is better tomorrow? We've got an education gap. And the hard thing is with the education gap is people don't understand. And we've got to be really careful how we actually communicate when we're educating. So some people won't understand the things that you do that you have to do to keep your farm going. And so there is a misinterpretation at times of what's good, what's bad, because we just don't understand. So we've got to keep educating. There's health and wellness, which is a given, but that goes beyond just the human. That goes to the animal, and that goes to the planet, and that goes everywhere. But the big thing is nutrition to the human as well. And what we've missed the mark on is, do you know how incredibly nutritious milk is? I'm sure you do. It's off the charts. It's almost impossible to replicate, or it is impossible to replicate, the nutritional value of the milk that comes from an animal, in particular cow's milk. So we've got to make sure that people understand that nutritional value. We've got to make sure that the consumer gets how much nutrition comes from drinking cow's milk. Because when you take an almond milk or juice or whatever you want to call it, don't get upset if I call it milk, it's just easier, and you fortify and you throw in all these vitamins and things that come out of cow's milk, the stomach can't digest it the same. But we're built to actually consume the milk. We're actually built to digest the beautiful nutrient that comes from within it. Look, there's all these other things that come through. Look, animal welfare is another big one, and it's going to be perception. So what you think is good for animals might be a bit different to the consumer, and that's where we need to start working out what do they believe is good animal husbandry and what do we believe is actually practical and real. And everyone's going to have different ideas, right? Like, I'm mental about my animals. I'm a huge red meat eater, but I won't actually eat any of the cows that I have because I love my animals. So every time I eat a bit of red meat, I have a little bit of upset, but I still eat it. And but ultimately, you know, my idea of animal welfare is probably quite different to what reality is at times. And that's someone who's slightly educated in the sector. We do have an inconsistency of farming methodologies around the world, and the example of that was the recent report that came out about whether you should eat meat or dairy and blah, 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 blah. We're always getting told what we should do. But they didn't look at pasture, grass-fed cows within that study. It was only feedlots. So there's this inconsistency throughout the world and understanding around how people farm and the value of that to the planet and people. Food safety is a big one. Cost points, you know, where do we want to fit with a cost point? And we've got to remember that economic relevance comes in. So cost point is going to be, we don't want to be the cheapest. And I think Colin said it before, and I even think the Minister said it. We don't want to be the cheapest because that doesn't bring any value back to our farm gate. And that's why we're pivoting more towards value than volume. Demographics, the millennials coming through. I sat with a girl once, we're having, mentoring breakfast, and I was chewing through my bacon, and she said, oh, I'm a vegan. I said, oh, talk me through that, which is my code usually for, ooh, I really want to judge you, but I can't. I've got to be an adult about it. And she said, oh, it's better for the planet. And I said, talk me through that. And so, these are the things where we have people that don't understand, and we've got different demographics. We can't just bash it out of them or bash it into them. It is going to be what it is. So that's where we've got to keep communicating, selling, showing the value, and sometimes myth-busting when we can. And don't lose sight of how important it is that we are free from in this country. Free from GMO, we are pretty much free from antibiotics. We don't use preventative antibiotics much, only at, the dry cow side of it. And a lot of the free-froms that we do, we really don't use a lot of chemicals. There's actually amazing things we do in this country that you go to a supermarket in America and they have a whole aisle about it. And they just have big signs about it. And there's people flocking to that area. So the free-from is really important. And that's why organic's really trendy. It's what people perceive it to be, not the fact that it is organic. So the reason people perceive it to be healthier because they assume that you use less chemical, you use, less antibiotic, or you don't use antibiotics, and it's a free-from environment. So these are the sorts of things that consumers want, but they will evolve. They won't kind of significantly change, but you'll find that they do start to shift, and that's where New Zealand has to be really aware of these signals because we're exporting so much of what we produce, and we do need the consumer to see it as desirable. But we've also got to remember that when we understand these signals, that we capture the value of what we're already producing. And look, there are loads of opportunities out there. One thing I would say is we've got to kind of remember sentiment. And as much as we probably hate this, and look, I'm a huge sentimental person, right? I can emotionalise anything. I can emotionalise buying a bottle of milk at the supermarket. But it's, sentiment will override science in the marketplace. And I'm not saying that we forget about science. We just probably have to communicate science in a way that has sentiment attached. So those emotional people actually start to absorb it. And this is the problem. Someone comes out and says, oh, bloody farmers, they're mean to all their cows, that's awful. And then instead of going back with a very sentimental message around how much we love our animals and how much we're devastated when something happens to them and all of these things, we say, yeah, they're bloody great, we like them. And so, we've actually got to show some emotion and really hit back with that emotion and that sentiment when we're communicating out there. And I'm noticing it a lot more on social media now, where you're actually seeing through Twitter that farmers are really emotional in a positive way about how they farm, what they farm, and things that are happening on farm. We really need to get industry alignment. And I think for us, people talk about the urban and rural divide. Bugger that, there's a rural divide. Like if I sit with a bunch of sheep and beef farmers, they tell me about how, oh, poor dairy farmers, shit, this is sunset industry, it's terrible, it's time out for them. I sit with dairy farmers, oh geez, I wouldn't want to be a beef farmer right now. There's no way that meat industry is going to go anywhere. Sit with avocado people, oh, we need to get rid of all the cows, let's put in some more avocado trees. So everybody thinks that they've got the golden cow, I guess, or the golden goose. We don't, we actually all need each other. We need to work together because in the future, we might have actually multidisciplined farms. And so we actually need to start thinking about how do we work for biology and for the good of the land. So how do we work together more and align more? And how do we have a vision and know what we want to be famous for? And the big thing is I often have slight debates with people around the feedlot versus grass. And the ultimate thing is what are we bloody good at? And one of the things we're really great at is growing grass. And we grow amazing grass. And then we produce incredible product from that grass. So we need to decide as a country or as an industry, what do we want to be famous for? Do we want to be famous for half-assed kind of sometimes doing feedlots okay? Or do we actually want to be famous for what we do really well and we can be profitable at? And don't be afraid of being an ingredient. The thing is, and I've been one of the terrible ones for it, don't be a commodity, we've got to avoid commodities, the worst thing ever. A commodity is something that goes away in a brown paper bag that becomes anonymous. But it's okay to be a really high value ingredient. So if our milk powder is going away to some high-end product overseas and New Zealand gets recognition for that, there is a provenance story back to that ingredient, then that's okay because it means it's a high-end ingredient. If it's completely anonymous and it ends up in a buffet Well, your milk powder's not going to, but your lamb might, and it ends up in a buffet, then that's just a commodity. And we've got to remember that we can't produce enough to be in the commodity space. That's a volume game. I went up to Russia about 4 or 5 years ago now, visited a guy in his bank who was cropping 345,000 hectares, trying to buy the neighbour that was the equivalent. And at that time, we only cropped 220,000 hectares through all of New Zealand, the whole place. 110,000 of those were actual cash crops. And that's not including the Northland crops and the Raglan ones. But so, those are the things that we need to think about. That's why we've got to be in the value game. It's not because it's niche and it's trendy. It's just real. We don't have enough land to play in this space. But we can be the most amazing ingredient in high-value products. And then, look, we've got to think of the whole economy, the whole ecosystem. It's no good that you get pressure, that you've got to do this and you've got to look after the environment and you've got to do all these things, and then your processor isn't bloody doing it. Every one of us has got to be doing it. We've all got to be doing our thing in this. So start pushing your processors. Start pushing, especially your Fonterra, you're a shareholder in that. Push your organisations, and they are doing a really good job of actually moving through to renewable energies, but push them too so they're doing their bit so you don't feel like you're the only one carrying the can. And don't freak out too much about, climate change is going to be a bit different, but that'll bring with it some random opportunities. Apparently Southland's going to be the best place to grow maize in 2025, or 2030 it might be. That's awesome. I mean, I'm going to be growing bananas in my backyard if that's the case in the Waikato, but it's what can we do and what can we evolve and change to? And that doesn't mean you have to get rid of your cows and stop milking. It might just mean we do things a bit differently. So with every bad thing that comes, there will be an opportunity. The opportunities live under rocks and you have to go searching for them. The disruption will smack you in the face at 4 a.m. So make sure that you're searching for that opportunity regardless of what's happening. The other thing is, be amazing at what we do now. And look, some of you might know I'm Brent Love. I work with him at KPMG. Just totally my favourite person on the planet. Love him to bits. And I like shiny new things. I got quite excited one day. I was like, should we just see if everyone could just grow yellow peas, Brent? Bugger the cows. And hey, Brent, quiet. Big breath. JJ. If they don't know that they're profitable growing cows, they're not going to know if they're profitable growing yellow peas. So the idea was, it doesn't matter what we grow or what we change to, if we don't have a good business and we don't know that we're profitable now or how to be profitable, how the hell are we going to shift and evolve? And that's why we have to be really, really good at what we do now. And that isn't just about being a good farmer, and that isn't just about having the best cows, and that isn't about just having the best grass. You have to be the best at business. You have to be the best employer. And I do not give a shit if you don't like staff and having staff, because I hear that a lot. If you don't like having staff, scale down to a system that you don't require them anymore. Your staff do not deserve to work for someone that don't like having staff. They have a right to be led in the best way possible. And if you don't know how to do it, learn. And if you don't want to do it, scale down so you don't need a team. And if you have a team and you are leading, that is a privileged place to be, and make the most of it. So be the best leader, be the best farmer, be the best business person, be the best person at home, be the best you. And that sounds really cheesy, like a Tony Robbins thing, but actually understand what is important to you. Because these are all the factors that are going to grow in to us being the best. And these are the things you can control. So when you have a really scary moment where the world feels like it's changing too fast and you're exhausted and you can't keep pace, stop and focus on what you can do. And you can control those things. You can control how you run your business. You can control how you lead your teams. And you can control how you lead your farm. So be the best we can be now and do that today. But there isn't a silver bullet, right? So I'd love to give you a blueprint. Again, I'd be on my yacht in the Bahamas if I did, if I could say, hey, do these 5 things. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to rescue you. But you don't need it because you've got all you need inside. And you've just got to start thinking every day like a new business, every single day. Because one day you were a startup, right? One day you did start in a business. So you probably started as a contract milker, you moved through share milking, you bought a farm. Or you currently are a startup where you are a contract milker and you're starting out. Every day you've got to think about, what do I need to do a little bit differently? But what can you afford to let go of? What are you still doing today that doesn't serve you well anymore, but you've just been doing because you've always done it? because we're just getting a bigger to-do list, and I think some of those things we can probably strike them off because we don't actually need them anymore. So a bit of a startup mindset. What are we doing? What do we need to change? But what can we let go of? And then the next part is the future-focused ecosystem. I'm telling you what, farming's a real lonely business. I know that, and I've only got 2 cows. And you need to have a future-focused ecosystem around you. And what that means is the people around you that support you, your farm consultant, your banker, your accountant, anyone that comes to your property, make sure they are challenging you. Because I'm telling you right now, if you have a farm consultant that comes every month, walks the farm and tells you you're doing a great job, why the bloody hell are you paying them for it? Because nothing's changing. And I'm not saying you should have someone on your farm telling you to change every month, but it should be someone giving you some challenge. Don't be afraid to get rid of your rural professional that is not doing anything for you. Make them work for their money. Don't screw them down on price. Don't try and make it cheap. Make it of value. What have you done for me? Make them tell you the value that they are giving you, because you deserve that. You work bloody hard, and it's expensive to bring people into your business, so when you do, make them work for it. And start with your accountant, except for KPMG, because they're really good. But you work with your accountant, you push them, and if they tell you I can't get your accounts in for another 6 months, go to another one, because you need those accounts to assess your business, and 6 months after the fact is not good enough and not good for you. And make sure that they're sitting down with you and talking about the future. Make sure they sit down with you and they're helping you understand your business. Look, I'll be honest, I hate numbers with a passion, and ironically I've always been in like numbers businesses, but the key here is to make sure that you're actually pushing your ecosystem or those people in your business to work really hard for you and have a future focus. And that might challenge you a bit sometimes, and you might think some of them are a bit of a dick. You'll be like, oh, I don't like that Barry, he's a bit of a dick. He always asks me these really hard questions that I don't like to answer. Shake Barry's hand, keep him in your business. You don't have to be his friend, you don't have to like him, but if he's adding value and getting you to think differently, then he's adding value. I'd love to see attribute pricing, and you don't have control of this and I don't have control of this, but I keep nagging at it. I'd love to see attribute pricing across our processes, because there's a whole group of people doing some incredible things and they're getting paid the same as the guy next to them that isn't doing incredible things, or is just doing the same shit that they've always done, and they do it at a base minimum. And it's frustrating the good. So please don't tolerate the laggards in our industry. I'm not calling for martial law, but I strongly suggest that you call people out. Call people out who are not doing the right things, because every time they do one bad thing, it destroys the 12 good things you've done, and you deserve better. And I'll give you an example. Last night, a friend sent through a picture, had been on a farm doing a bit of a thing, found some cows actually in the river, and I didn't even think that happened in New Zealand. And to be honest, cows are obviously quite good swimmers because they're up quite deep. And but he's in this awful situation where he can't call this out because he feels that he's at risk as a young farmer to do this. And so we've got to call out the laggards. We've got to have the confidence to call out, and we've got to make sure that we support those who are calling them out, because they will do nothing for you if we continue to let them stay in this industry. So don't sit there and go, it's none of my business. Oh, how Barry farms, it's nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with you. Because he'll be one of the reasons that we don't get good young people coming through the industry, because they're really frustrated. And innovation and data, just like, this is not about replacing humans, and it's not about replacing you. It's actually about making your intuition even better and stronger. So don't feel that this is going to take over what you do, and don't feel that it's going to be easy. Do things that are practical for your business. If you don't want to use a computer in innovation and you're highly profitable, happy days. Who cares? That's great. But if you're not profitable and you're not sure about the management of your business, a lot of it will come down to behaviour. So you can have all the technology in the world. If your behaviour is crap, technology will not fix it. So you need to make sure that you're being practical and using it the best that you can, and working really hard with that technology. And I'll give you a bit of an example, which is probably just a really shit example, but I'm good with that. I was a currency trader. I started my career as a currency trader, and I hated the guy that I worked for. You know why? Because he wouldn't let me use a computer. He made me do everything longhand, manually. And I'm like, God, everyone else gets to use all this cool technology. Now, 2 years later, or 3 years later, I went and worked at another bank, because that's what you do when you're trading, because you get more money and you get a month off for free and stuff. But anyway, so I'm at this other bank, and all of their technology went down, and I was the only person that could calculate the currency. And all of a sudden I realised what he was doing. He was teaching me intuition. And then when I added technology to that intuition, I actually had just more power and speed and understanding. So don't be afraid to teach your guys the old way to get intuition and then apply that technology across the top of it. I am going to shut up real soon, I promise. And then the other thing is diversified land use. Just think about what you can do in your land and don't get worried about this. Like, this isn't a put it all on black and hope it comes in. This isn't a that you all of a sudden magically only milk sheep tomorrow. Start thinking about different things that you can do in your land. Get your consultant in that's not buddy earning his money and tell him to do a test on those 2 hectares over there. Could I grow berries? If I could grow berries, how could I sell them? What could I do? No, berries don't work. Cool, on to the next thing. Don't be afraid to try some stuff that is actually maybe not isn't going to work, but it tests what you might be able to do. And make sure it makes sense. I don't know, it might be some sort of trees that you can use as a shelter or somewhere you can put your effluent or I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist, but there's going to be some ways you can do these things. And if you don't investigate and you don't try, you're not going to know. So diversified land use isn't a scary thing. That's not a bad thing. Just it's an opportunity to shift and change. And look, the biggest thing I'd say is, and I know just me saying it is not going to make you feel proud, but do you understand how far this industry has come in the last 10 years? Have you sat there and looked at what it was and where you've come to? It's incredible. Like the other day I was so stoked, like I was on Twitter because I've got no life, so that's how I have a social life. And these farmers were having this debate around commodity versus value add versus international markets, and it was so cool and it was kind of heated and really awesome. You know, all I thought of was, shit, that's cool. Because, 10 years ago, there's no way they would have been talking like this. No way people would have been engaged in this sort of space. So we've come a hell of a long way, and we're talking about some really technical things that others don't get. We are doing a great job. I get to go to China next week and hopefully come back. It's a good place, apparently. And talk about the dairy industry. And you know what I love? It's because I'm so proud of it. It's such an easy thing to talk about because I have such great pride in what you do. And I really just hope that you do. I would love farmers to start standing tall again and take pride. And I'm going to sound like your mum here saying you've got to love yourself or someone else will love you. But you can't look for external factors to feel proud. You can't start looking for someone in the paper to tell you you're a good farmer or that urban communities to all of a sudden be in love with you. You've got to get it from inside. You've got to believe in it. So if you are genuinely doing things that are not bad, and if someone was filming you every single day, no one would be upset. Well, the crazies will always be upset. The normal person would not be upset. Then you have everything to be proud of. But don't underestimate your power to change and evolve into the future. And there's so far we can still go with this, because you think of where we've come from and how much energy and effort you've put in to change and evolve. And there's so much further that we can go when the time requires us to do so. So look, I'm just going to shut up because I feel like, woo. But if there's questions, feel free to be like hardcore in them.
So again, we've got a couple of roving mics. We've got a couple of minutes. Raise your hand if there's a question. John, over here.
This way, John. Sorry, guys.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for that, Julia, and agree with a lot of what you've said. Once upon a time, probably before your bus was born, the dairy industry, and I used to sit here and be one of the youngest, and I'm not anymore, but if you turn the clock back 40 years, the discussion was around protein. The dairy industry could sell lots of protein, and your example of the cafe up there, great protein meals, but probably needed a bit of fat to give it some taste. But the discussion back then was, we can sell lots of protein, but fat's a disaster. What are we going to do? The industry was, we had margarine, vegetable fats, the disruptor. And this is not new. I think that's one of the other things we should tell the audience today. Disruptors have been there forever. Today, we sit here, and the guys that are getting a milk check are making more out of fat than they are out of protein. And I just wonder, I disagree, I agree with a lot of the things you've said today, but how much of this is fad? How much of these disruptors aren't going to be there in 10 years' time? And I think, part of that is we've got to do stuff better ourselves, tell our story and that sort of thing. But I think this has been, with all due respect, I think it's a bit oversold.
Yep, cool. So disruptors have been there since the beginning of time, and they will continue to be there. I think the speed in which they come at us now has accelerated to a point where it becomes overwhelming. The whole protein story is a bit ironic because you need fibre too. I'm not sure if your mum rings you up and asks you if you did a poo today, but mine does. And so, fibre is really important in the diet, and wellness is about balance. So I think we've had that shift. Look, what I would like to acknowledge and say is that the reason people got crazy about production is because we told you to. And we said it was the way of the future and let's be the biggest producer and all that stuff. Things will shift and change. I can't tell you that in 50 years some other idiot's not going to be standing up here telling you to produce as much as possible and bugger the value, I don't know. It won't be me. And although I'll still be alive because I'm very young. And so, the thing is with that is it's still going to continue to shift and evolve, and there's no set and forget. And there is going to be new fads that come through. And there are, alternative proteins right now, the likes of the Impossible Foods, some of those things haven't been particularly health tested as such. They're new to the market. But it depends. Of course, everything can be a fad, but how long can we survive pretending if they're a fad, even if it's 10 years, 20 years? We actually won't be able to economically survive just waiting for them to pass. So that's where we have to keep evolving. And yet, it is a bit overtold about telling the story. Do we want 14,000 dairy farmers on Twitter every night? Probably not. Maybe we do. I don't know. Sometimes you guys correct me out, but no. But it's about making sure that how we tell our story meets the audience as well. So what we do sometimes is we tell a story that we want to hear ourselves, and we've got to tell a story that meets the consumer's need or the person of what they want to tell and hear. So around free-froms, we want to be telling the people like West Coast of America that story, but just telling the story isn't enough. So we do have to live it and breathe it. But these fads are going to shift and change, and there's new stuff's going to come in, and someone's going to disrupt the alternative protein market. And it's not going to stop. It's just how it is. But it will move faster and faster. And I probably did not answer that question at all, but you got my email address.
Hey, look, in context of time, Julia's sticking around a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I'll ask you to take the time to connect with Julia later in the session when we've got a break. But we need to keep moving. The couple of things from me, Julia, thank you very much. MSH, great. Who knows what that stands for? Make shit happen, yeah, it's great stuff. And the one thing that resonates with me more than anything in that conversation is how well do us as farmers know our consumer. And it's something that I don't think we do very well. We're very focused on what's inside the farm gate, but how important is it for us to understand what's beyond and starting to realise that our product has a consumer, and we need to start thinking around how we deliver a quality product. And that's about to resonate just a little bit more what Julie said. It's about being better than before. We have to be. We can't, if you do what you've done, you're going to get what you got. It's a changing environment, a changing consumer. We need to be better than before. So thank you, Julie. Much appreciated.